She sifted through faded letters in the dim attic light. Each word unveiled her parents' web of lies and an affair that ruined lives. But as shadows lengthened, a final envelope trembled in her hand. What horror waited inside? "What the hell is this?" Sophia's voice cut through the dim study like a jagged blade, low and brittle, with barely contained fury. The letter crinkled in her ink-stained fingers, yellowed paper exhaling faded lavender and dust, a spectral whisper from the grave. She'd been buried in the wreckage of her mother's desk, forgotten ledgers crumbling, photographs curling like dying leaves, a vial of perfume murmuring ghosts of endless nights, when the false bottom betrayed itself. Hidden beneath, this. Sealed with a lover's knot, scrawled in script that mocked her father's neat precision. David froze in the doorway, his shadow clawing long across the moth-eaten Persian rug Margaret clung to like a talisman. His face, etched with the quiet erosion of years spent papering over cracks, twitched. Just once. "Sophia, put that down. It's not yours to." "Not mine?" She rose, the chair's scrape on scarred floorboards dragging like a stifled scream. The room squeezed in tight, walls peeling faded florals in the corners, air heavy with neglect's sour bite. Bookshelves bowed under unread tomes, spines split like brittle bones. Sophia's pulse throbbed slow in her ears, syncing with the mantel clock's relentless tick. She'd come scavenging for puzzle pieces of the past, rebuilding the flawless facade her parents peddled, their marriage an ironclad keep. But this letter, its words swam in her vision. "My dearest M, last night in the dockside motel. David must never know." Margaret glided in behind him, silk blouse rustling like brittle autumn leaves, eyes glinting sharp as shattered glass. She'd lingered in the hall, herding movers with that unyielding poise, each order a barricade against collapse. Now, her lips compressed, hands gripping a cardboard box like chainmail. "Give it here, Sophia. You're dredging trouble that's best left drowned." Sophia pulled back, the paper fever-hot against her palm, ice spreading through her veins. Her mother, Margaret, loomed unbowed, the architect of their scripted lives, every dinner a rehearsed symphony of accord. But the letter's poison seared, infidelity's shadow, an illicit tangle, her father named not as partner, but as barrier. Sophia's thoughts reeled, the pristine bond shattering in her hand. She ached to rip it wide, to claw out the truth gnawing at her, yet dread twisted deeper, ostracism, the clan splintering, abandoning her to the void. David edged closer, his murmur soft as fog, ever the appeaser, eyes seeking Margaret's lead. "Let's not do this now. We can talk later. Keep things intact." His hands dangled, hesitant, the evasion in his posture a dull throb of familiarity. He'd always sidestepped, caulked fissures with quiet, but this laid bare the decay underneath. Margaret's stare iced over, dominating the space with the mere cant of her head. "It's nothing, Sophia. Old drivel from before you drew breath. You're conjuring phantoms from thin air." But her knuckles blanched on the box, doubts flickering behind the bulwark, the legacy she vaulted now swaying on a precipice. Sophia's breath snagged, disquiet bleeding like ink through water. The study shrank, laced with silent indictments, betrayal's burden crushing down. She creased the letter deliberate and slow, sliding it into her pocket, fabric rasping rough against her skin. Truth or fabrication, it had already begun fraying them, thread by fragile thread. The letter's revelations festered like an untreated gash, suspicion honing to a razor's edge in the study's smothering murk. Hours seeped into evening, the air sodden with rain-lashed streets and interred sins. Sophia's determination solidified, betrayal's acrid bite propelling her down the shadowed corridor toward the den, where her father sipped his nightly scotch, blind to the tempest raging in her gaze. "It's nothing worth dredging up, Elena. Put it away before your mother sees." David's voice grated low from the leather armchair, fingers steepled like a ward against the lamp's harsh glare. The study reeked of stale pipe smoke and polished wood. Scents embedded in heavy curtains, thick with accumulated hush. Elena stood taut by the desk, letter pinched in her fist, its borders ragged as the faith crumbling in her core. Nothing? She jabbed it at him, paper quivering in the stifling air. This is from her, your sister, dated 1972. Talking about the arrangement, with Mom's name stamped right there. What arrangement, Dad? The one propping up your flawless family portrait? He stirred, chair groaning under his bulk, eyes darting to the half-open door where darkness pooled in the hall. Sweat gleamed anxious at his temples, but he mustered a smile. Thin, rehearsed. You're over-reading faded scrawl, kid. Family lore's riddled with half-lies, missteps we entomb to endure. We did it for you. For everyone. Margaret swept in then, heels stabbing sharp on the hardwood, silk scarf knotted like a garrote at her throat. What's this uproar? Elena, hand that over. Now. Her command left no room for defiance, eyes slitting as she seized the letter, lips pursing over its lines. Barriers erected in her stance, shoulders braced against the breach. Elena snatched it back, flush creeping up her neck. No. This reeks of decay, Mom. Treachery. You two, always the united front. Now this? Swear it's not what it seems. David leaned in, tone dipping to a soothing hush. Listen, we're not stashing bones to wound you. It's just ancient scars. Let it lie, Elena. Excavating only shatters what we've forged. His plea held that yielding barb, a gentle nudge to relent, threaded with dread of fissures gaped to abysses. Margaret crushed the letter faintly before ironing it flat, her command eroding at the rims. You think you grasp disgrace? This clan's weathered graver than your doubts. Drop it, or rue rousing what merits burial. Her glance to David begged alliance, veiling the gnaw of her own frailties beneath the directive. Elena's heartbeat pounded in her ears, ire simmering to a keener point. Rage at their dodges, the circuitous dance skirting verity. She pocketed the letter, will forging like metal in flames. I'm not relenting, not till I learn what you two truly are. She pivoted to the door, their stares weighting her back, suspicion twisting vice-like in her belly. The pristine veneer split, shadows of duplicity elongating beneath. David sighed, rubbing his temples. Elena, wait! But she was already gone. Footsteps resounding down the hall, the rift carving deeper with each stride. Later that night, the study's shadows adhered to Elena like a clammy shroud, air dense with latent decay. David's words reverberated in her mind, a persistent throb unyielding, kindling an icy tangle of terror in her gut. She crept back into the room under night's veil, hands quivering as they sifted forsaken drawers. The burden of concealed sins bearing down, ponderous as the dust-muffled quiet. Treachery murmured in the murk, luring her further into the history she dreaded unearthing. Why keep digging, Elena? You've already stirred up enough ghosts in this house. Sophia's voice pierced the study's hazy gloom, keen as a neglected blade's edge. She lingered by the desk, fingers grazing the heap of jaundiced papers Elena had jammed back into the drawer. The air bore a faint, sharp sting of desiccated ink, blending with the moldy aroma of leather tomes lining the walls like mute sentinels. Margaret loomed near the hearth, arms folded vice-tight across her chest, eyes flitting between her daughters like a trapped beast, gauging perils. Elena whirled from the bookshelf, cheeks aflame, a vein throbbing at her temple. Because someone has to, Soph. Dad's treating these letters like refuse, but they're evidence. About him, about us all. Her speech cascaded, laced with chronic vexation, fists balling to dam the fury poised to flood. She craved equity, mending, but the specter of dismissal gnawed, driving her to rashness. Margaret's mouth narrowed, stance unyielding, a bastion against dissolution. Enough! This family's endured harsher than echoes from bygone days. Stow it, both of you. Her timbre was subdued, reined, yet it fractured at the margins, exposing her compulsion to guard them from ignominy. Beneath, her own blunders loomed shadowy. Doubts she interred under tears of authority. Sophia disregarded her mother, tugged by a loose panel in the desk's flank. Her inquisitiveness drew her on, a subdued pull against the dread knotting her innards, the apprehension that verity might sunder all, stranding her forsaken and spurned. She wedged at the timber, nails grating on obscured pivots, until it yielded with a muted, grudging groan. Dust swirled in the lamplight as she delved within, palm enfolding something chill and firm. A photograph, borders tattered from epochs of hiding. She withdrew it, heart slamming her ribs. The picture glared back, her father, younger, arm-draped proprietary over a woman not Margaret. The unknown's grin was confidential, head canted toward him in intimacy born of twilight trysts. Sophia's inhalation snared, the chamber's stifling heft compressing, the mantel clock's faint pulse magnifying her own. Who was she? Paramour? Fabrications stitched into their ideal lineage. Elena, look at this. Sophia's timbre quavered, proffering the photo like indictment. Dread flowered frigid in her breast, phantoms of desertion flickering, parents rending, kin disintegrating, abandoning her amid debris. Elena's eyes bulged, snatching the image. That's not... God, Dad with her? This alters all. Her ire blazed fiercer, righteous yet skirting impulse, her dread of muting spurring the blaze. Margaret advanced, clawing at the gap between them. Give me that. It's nothing. A moment from prior. Before us. But her grasp shook as she claimed it, her rampart splintering, eyes scanning the portal, as if David might erupt to staunch the leak. The perfidy dangled dense, unvoiced, the gradual erosion of confidence twisting constrictor-like around them. Sophia retreated, the photo's specter haunting her psyche, dread anchoring her. The study contracted now, walls encroaching with concealed rifts mass, her reality canting on collapse's brink. The anger coiled tighter in Elena's gut as Sophia's words lingered like cigarette ash in the stale air, the study's shadows swallowing any hope of retreat. Hours blurred into a sleepless vigil, the house's oppressive weight bearing down, each creak a whisper of buried betrayals. Desperation clawed through the haze by midnight, her father's ghost sharper than ever, driving her toward the one thread left untugged, the estranged aunt whose silence had festered for years. Elena yanked the drawer open again, her nails scraping the wood like claws on bone. The yellowed papers spilled out, but she ignored them, her gaze locking on the tarnished address book buried at the bottom. Sophia's words still echoed, stirred up enough ghosts, but the frustration boiled over, hot and unyielding. She flipped the book to the A's, thumb stabbing Aunt Clara's faded number. The phone's coiled cord tangled around her wrist as she lifted the receiver, dialing with deliberate jabs. David shifted in the armchair across the room, his pipe clenched between his teeth, unlit. The study smelled of stale tobacco and dust, the walls pressing in like forgotten accusations. "Elena, put that down," he said, voice low, laced with that familiar plea. "We don't need outsiders dragging this up." She pressed the receiver to her ear, the dial tone buzzing like a swarm in her skull. "Outsiders? This is family, David. Our family." Her words sliced the air, sharp enough to draw blood. Sophia hovered closer, arms crossed, her eyes darting between them. Curious, yes, but edged with that calculating glint, like she was weighing how to steer the storm. The line clicked. A raspy voice answered, distant and cracked. "Clara speaking." "Aunt Clara, it's Elena." She gripped the phone tighter, knuckles whitening against the black plastic. We found letters. About Dad, the business deals, the money that vanished. I need to know." Silence stretched, broken only by the faint creak of David's chair as he leaned forward, face paling in the lamplight's sickly glow. Sophia's breath hitched. She stepped nearer, one hand twitching as if to snatch the receiver away. Clara's laugh rasped like sandpaper on rust. "Elena, girl, you should have left those ghosts buried. Your father, he didn't just bend the rules, he broke them for good. That partnership in the 80s. He sold out his own brother, my husband, for a cut of the doc's smuggling ring, promised loyalty, then fed the feds just enough to bury him, took the cash and ran, left us scraping in the shadows. Elena's pulse thundered, the room tilting. Betrayal hit like a gut punch, raw and festering. What? Dad betrayed Uncle Theo? For money? More than money, Clara spat, voice hardening. He erased us, said it was for the family's future. Yours, supposedly. But look at you now, digging up the rot. David bolted up, his pipe clattering to the floor. Hang up, Elena. This is lies, twisting the past. But his eyes betrayed him, wide, evasive, the anxiety cracking through his passive mask. He paced, hands flexing uselessly, avoiding her stare. Sophia edged in, her voice a whisper laced with false calm. Elena, maybe she's wrong. We should talk first. Keep this between us. Manipulation dripped from her tone, a bid to pull Elena back, to shield whatever fragile unity they clung to. But Elena saw it, the fear of fracture, the way Sophia's gaze flicked to David, seeking alliance. Elena slammed the receiver down, the impact vibrating through the desk. Anger surged, white-hot, scorching the air between them. Lies? Dad destroyed lives for his unity? And you two, standing there pretending it didn't happen. She rounded on David, her shadow looming in the low light. You knew, didn't you? All this time, burying it to keep your perfect little family intact. David's face crumpled, passive aggression bubbling up. I did it for us, Elena, for peace. What good is truth if it tears everything apart? Sophia reached out, fingers brushing Elena's arm. Too late, too calculated. Don't do this. We're all we have. But Elena shrugged her off, the rift widening, mistrust coiling like smoke in the dim room. The ghosts weren't just stirred, they clawed free, hungry for reckoning. The dial tone hummed like a distant threat as Elena punched in the number, the room's shadows lengthening with each unanswered ring. What Aunt Clara revealed seeped in slow, staining her veins with grief's bitter ink, betrayal coiling tight around her chest. The argument erupted unspoken in her mind first, a slow burn of fractured trust, propelling her through the oppressive dusk toward her father's door. Secrets sharpened into weapons, ready to cut deep. The phone clattered against the oak side table, its coiled cords snapping taut like a vein under strain. Sophia's breath came in shallow bursts, the aunt's voice, Clara's, sharp as shattered glass, still slicing through her skull. Your father's buried more than bones in that old mill, girl. He knew about the affair, the payoffs, kept it all locked up to save his skin. The words burned, twisting curiosity into a knife's edge of fear, her family's fragile web fraying before her eyes. She stormed into the living room, the floorboards groaning under her steps like confessions unwilling to stay buried. David hunched in his armchair, newspaper folded into crisp quadrants, his eyes flicking up too late, too passive. Margaret perched on the sofa's arm, her fingers laced tight around a porcelain cup, steam curling up like unspoken accusations. The air in the room thickened with the scent of stale coffee and the faint, acrid tang of Margaret's lavender perfume, overripe and suffocating. You knew, Sophia spat, her voice low at first, coiling like smoke. Aunt Clara told me everything. The letters, the lies. Dad, you covered it up. For what? To keep this rotting facade intact? David's face paled, the paper crinkling in his grip as he set it aside with deliberate slowness. Sophia, sit down. You're twisting things. Clara's always been bitter, stirring pots that should stay cold. His tone edged passive-aggressive, a plea wrapped in deflection. But his eyes darted to Margaret, seeking alliance in the shadows of their shared silence. Margaret's cup rattled against the saucer, her lips thinning into a line of control fraying at the seams. Enough. This family's survived worse than old gossip. You think dragging it all out helps? It destroys us. Her voice rose, defensive barbs laced with the tremor of her deepest fear. Exposure. The shame she'd clawed to bury under layers of propriety. She leaned forward, overbearing even in retreat, her hand shooting out to grip Sophia's wrist. You're playing with fire, child. Stop before you burn us all. Sophia yanked free, the skin on her arm blooming red, a small violence that mirrored the grief swelling in her chest. Betrayal seeped in, cold and unrelenting, not just from the secrets, but from the way they circled her now, united against the truth she'd unearthed. Her father's avoidance, her mother's iron grip, it all pressed down, oppressive as the dim bulb overhead flickering like a dying pulse. "No," she whispered, then louder, the word cracking open the room. "I'm done protecting your ghosts. If you won't tell me, I will. To everyone, the neighbors, the papers. Let it all spill." David rose halfway, his chair scraping back with a hollow rasp, anxiety etching deeper lines into his face. "You wouldn't. Think of your mother, of us. Unity, Sophia. That's what matters." But his words faltered, passive walls crumbling under the weight of her stare, the dark history he'd evaded now clawing free. Margaret's eyes widened, insecurities flashing raw before she masked them with a snarl. "Threaten us? After all we've sacrificed?" The argument ignited fully then, voices overlapping in a slow, grinding clash. Accusations hurled like blunt instruments, mistrust poisoning every syllable. Sophia's heart ached with the grief of it. The family she'd clung to dissolving into fragments, abandonment's shadow looming as she realized the truth might orphan her from them all. She turned toward the door, the weight of their pleas pulling at her back. But she didn't stop. The secrets would out. The mill's buried sins demanded it. In the dim hallway, her reflection in the mirror caught her. Eyes hollow, face streaked with the first hot tracks of tears, grieving the innocence she'd lost, one revelation at a time. The weight of Clara's words settled like damp rot in Sophia's chest. Betrayal coiling tighter with every ragged breath. Hours blurred into a haze of shadowed corners and unanswered questions, the old mill's secrets festering in her mind. By dawn, resolve hardened her veins, cold steel against the unraveling lies. She slipped into the chill morning fog, keys biting into her palm, drawn inexorably toward the man who'd buried it all. The door slammed open, splintering the frame's old varnish like a confession forced out. Elena froze in the dim parlor, the letter from Aunt Clara crumpled in her fist, its ink still smudged from the frantic call that had unraveled everything. David's pipe clattered to the floor, tobacco scattering across the threadbare rug like ash from a dying fire. Margaret shot up from her armchair, her knitting needles stabbing the air. "What in God's name?" Margaret's voice cracked, sharp as the heels she planted on the hardwood. Her eyes, narrowed behind wire-rimmed glasses, locked on Elena's face, searching for cracks to seal before they spread. Elena didn't wait. The words from the phone burned in her throat, Clara's accusations a lit fuse. Dad knew. About the affair, the money, all of it buried in that mill like it never happened. She thrust the letter forward, her knuckles white, the paper trembling only from the force of her grip. The room's stale air thickened with the scent of David's spilled tobacco and Margaret's rosewater perfume, cloying, suffocating. David slumped back in his leather chair, the springs groaning under him. His face, etched with lines from too many unpaid nights, twisted, not in denial, but something worse. Resignation. "Elena, sit down. This family's held together longer than you think. We don't need to drag up ghosts." "Ghosts?" Elena's laugh was bitter, slicing the quiet. She paced the room's edges, her shadow stretching long across the wallpaper's faded floral print, a prison of petals. "Clara said you took payoffs to keep quiet. Mom's mistake with that man from the factory? You covered it all, to save your own skin." Her voice rose, each word a hammer strike. But inside, frustration coiled tighter, her fear of being dismissed fueling the fire. She wanted justice, not this endless silence that choked them all. Margaret stepped forward, her hand clamping Elena's wrist like a vice. "Enough. You think you know shame? I've shielded this house from worse than whispers." Her tone dripped control, but her eyes darted to David, betrayal flickering there, old wounds reopening. She released Elena abruptly, smoothing her apron as if order could stitch the fraying bonds. We're not airing laundry for some aunt's grudge. Unity, Elena. That's what matters. David's pipe lay forgotten. He rubbed his temples, passive as ever, but his avoidance cracked now, passive aggression seeping through. Your mother's right. I did what I had to. The affair, it was her folly. But the bribes? That was the town's rot, not ours. I kept us afloat, even if it meant looking away. His voice, low and measured, unraveled the thread. The mill's secrets spilled out. Payoffs from crooked foremen, the lover's threats silenced with blood money. His own complicity in burying the evidence under concrete and lies. Each revelation hung in the air, heavy as the dust motes dancing in the lamplight. Elena's world tilted. The family she knew fractured before her. David's anxious unity a facade for cowardice. Margaret's control a veil over her sins. Mistrust bloomed, arguments overlapping in a cacophony. Margaret's defenses clashing with Elena's accusations. David's pleas dissolving into silence. Betrayal stung deep, her anger reckless now, pushing her toward the door, toward whatever reckless truth lay outside. But as the echoes faded, something hardened in her chest. Shattered, yes, lost in the rubble of their history. Yet resolve took root, cold and unyielding. She wouldn't be silenced. Not anymore. The door clicked shut behind her, the family's fractures sealed only in her mind, a vow forming. Justice would come, even if it tore them apart for good. 3 days later, the parlor's chaos had curdled into a suffocating silence that clung to Elena like cigarette smoke in a back-alley dive. She tossed on sweat-damp sheets, the father's venomous truths replaying in jagged loops, betrayals etched into the photograph's yellowed edges, unraveling the life she'd known. Unease gnawed at her ribs, a slow poison seeping through the oppressive night. Aunt Clara's cryptic hint about the woman flickering like a faulty neon sign. Dawn's gray light finally broke, but resolve had already hardened in the dark. I can't close my eyes without seeing that photograph again. The faded edges curling like secrets too long buried, the woman's smile sharp as a switchblade. Father's words from the letter claw at me. She was never one of us. 3 nights now, twisting in sweat-damp sheets, the house creaking like it's whispering back. Aunt Clara's note burned a hole in my pocket all day. She said the woman lived here once, in this very crumbling pile, before the lies piled higher than the dust. I have to go tomorrow, slip out before dawn, trace that address on Elm Street. But tonight, this dinner, Mother's idea, to mend fences after Elena's outburst, feels like walking into a trap I've set myself. The dining room presses in, walls papered in faded damask that peels at the corners, absorbing the flicker of a single bulb overhead. Forks scrape against chipped porcelain, the sound grinding like teeth on bone. Margaret sits at the head, her pearls a noose around her neck, posture rigid as the mahogany table she clutches with whitened knuckles. She's portioning out the graying roast, slices thin and deliberate, as if rationing truth along with the meat. Elena slouches opposite, her dark eyes flicking between us, a storm barely leashed, frustration carving lines deeper into her face since that parlor chaos. The letter she'd waved like a flag of surrender. Pass the salt, Margaret says, voice clipped, a command wrapped in silk. She doesn't look up, but I feel her gaze like a weight, measuring, always measuring. Preserving the facade, that's her game. Shield the name, bury the shame. But I know the cracks. I've seen her letters, hidden in the attic, pleading with ghosts from her youth. Elena snorts, sliding the shaker across without touching it, as if seasoning will fix this family's rot. Her words hang, laced with that anger she can't swallow, the kind that demands reckoning for every slight, every door slammed on her questions. She's been pacing the halls since Father's pipe hit the floor, unraveling the threads Clara started pulling. I shift in my chair, the wood biting into my spine, unease coiling low in my gut like smoke from a smoldering fuse. The photograph burns against my thigh, tucked in my skirt pocket, grainy proof of the woman who might rewrite us all. Sophia, the curious one, they call me, but fear gnaws deeper. What if chasing this abandons me to the void, rejected by the only blood I have? Still, I can't stay silent. Aunt Clara mentioned something, I say, voice threading out soft, testing. About a woman in an old picture. Said she knew our family, back when things were different. Margaret's fork pauses midair, gravy dripping slow as accusation. Her eyes lift then, defensive walls slamming up, controlling the spill. Clara talks nonsense, old widows spinning tales to feel important. But her tone wavers, a fracture, and I see the shadow flicker. Her past mistakes, the insecurities she smothers under command. Elena's head snaps up, fire igniting. Different? You mean before you scrubbed the truth clean, Mother? Father's revelations in that letter, about the affairs, the debts. Clara's not lying. She's the only one who won't. Anger surges, reckless now, her drive for justice shoving her forward, heedless of the shatter. The room tightens, oppressive as a vice, betrayal's bitter tang rising with the cooling food. Margaret's face pales, overbearing mask cracking. Enough! You'll ruin us all with your digging. But it's too late. Emotions erupt, raw and jagged. Elena's fury lashing out, my curiosity twisting into fearful pleas. Margaret's control fracturing into desperate pleas to hush it all. The bonds splinter, unease flooding the spaces between us, thick and unyielding as the shadows lengthening across the table. I clutch the photo tighter, knowing tomorrow's lead waits, but tonight, the family's facade bleeds out onto the linen. 3 days dragged by in a haze of shadowed corners and unspoken accusations, the letter's ink bleeding into her every thought like spilled secrets. Suspicion coiled tighter in her gut, a slow poison urging her onward. She slipped into her coat, the fabric heavy as regret, and navigated the rain-slick streets to the dingy cafe her aunt had mentioned in passing, a faded haunt where ghosts of the past might still linger. The door's bell jangled like a warning as she stepped inside, eyes scanning for cracks in the facade of her father's hidden life. That's when it clicked. The faded snapshot Aunt Elena had dismissed as just some old fling wasn't a loose end, but the thread unraveling their father's carefully knotted lies. Sophia gripped the chipped ceramic mug, steam curling like cigarette smoke in the dim cafe light, her knuckles whitening against the warmth. The place reeked of stale coffee grounds and fryer grease, the kind of dive where secrets fermented in the corners, untouched by the fluorescent buzz overhead. David shifted in the booth across from her, his fork scraping porcelain as he pushed limp fries around his plate. This was a mistake, Soph. Dragging us here on a hunch from Elena's gossip? We're not detectives. His voice carried that familiar edge, passive as a dull blade, but his eyes flicked to the door every few seconds, as if the past might slink in uninvited. Elena sat beside him, her posture rigid, lips pursed over her untouched salad. She'd been the one to let slip the detail last week, during one of their strained family calls, how the woman in the photo had slung espressos here back in the 80s, before vanishing into whatever hole their father had dug. Now, Elena's gaze bored into Sophia, passionate fire simmering beneath the restraint. You're chasing ghosts, niece. Let it go. Healing doesn't come from drudging up dirt. Sophia leaned forward, the vinyl seat creaking under her. The cafe hummed with low murmurs from the counter, waitstaff trading shifts, locals nursing hangovers. But her pulse drowned it out. 3 days of fractured sleep had honed her resolve into something sharp, reckless. Ghosts? That letter said she was never one of us, Elena. And this place? Aunt, you mentioned it like it was nothing, but I asked around. She slid a crumpled napkin across the table, scribbled notes in her tight script. Inquiries with the grizzled bartender who'd nodded at the description, pulling a dusty logbook from under the register. David's fork stilled. What the hell are you playing at? The woman's name was Lila Voss, Sophia said, voice low, slicing through the tension like a switchblade through fog. Worked here till 87. And get this, your logs, Elena, from when you waitressed summers? They show Dad coming in every Tuesday night, same time she clocked out. Not just coffee runs, tips left in cash, big ones. He wasn't buying lattes, he was buying silence. Elena's fork clattered down, her face flushing, a reckless spark igniting in her eyes. The advocate in her, warring with the fear of voices, shouted down. "You think I'd cover for him? After everything? I told you what I knew to protect you, not fuel this madness." David's shoulders slumped, but his words came out barbed, evading the core. "Protect us? Or protect your version of the truth? You've both been dancing around this family rot for years." He glanced at Sophia, accusation flickering. "And you, poking holes like it'll fix us. What if it just breaks everything?" Sophia felt the betrayal coil in her gut, suspicion blooming thick as the cafe's haze. They'd come here together, a fragile truce over cold plates, but now the masks cracked wide. Elena's hand trembled, not from fear, but fury held too long. Reaching across to snatch the napkin, crumpling it in her fist. "Lila Voss was trouble, David. Your father? He paid to keep her away because she knew too much. About the money, the deals. But dragging it up now? It'll abandon us all." The words hung, unspoken fractures spidering out. Sophia's heart hammered, determined yet adrift, the weight of rejection pressing in. David's avoidance twisted into quiet barbs, Elena's passion tipping reckless. In the booth's shadowed nook, the family's bonds frayed, suspicion seeding deeper than any unearthed name. The steam from the mug had faded, but the chill of unraveling lies clung like damp fog to Sophia's skin. That night, the apartment's shadows pressed in, the snapshot's secrets twisting her gut with betrayal's slow poison. Sleep evaded her, fear coiling tighter. The woman lingered in town, a specter refusing to dissolve. By morning's gray light, her hand hovered over the phone, knuckles still white, the oppressive weight urging her toward answers that promised only deeper darkness. The steam from the mug twisted upward, carrying the ghost of her father's aftershave, sharp, bitter, like the edge of a razor forgotten in the sink after one of his late-night rants. Sophia blinked hard, the cafe's vinyl booth sticking to her thighs as the memory clawed free. Him pacing the kitchen at dawn, voice low and jagged, swearing the family skeleton stayed buried because some things ain't worth the dig. But now, with Aunt Elena's casual brush-off echoing in her skull, those bones felt close enough to rattle. She fumbled for her phone, thumb hovering over the number Elena had let slip during their last strained holiday call. Still in town, peddling real estate from a sagging bungalow on the outskirts, easy enough to track. Sophia's pulse thudded against her ribs, a determined ache warring with the knot in her gut. Answers. She needed them, even if it meant prying open doors her family had bolted shut. The line rang twice before Elena picked up, her voice a gravelly drawl laced with cigarette tar. "Sophia, this better not be about that damn photo again. I told you." "It's about Dad," Sophia cut in, leaning into the receiver, the cafe's greasy spoon clatter fading behind her focus. "The woman in the snapshot. You called it a fling, but it's more. She's tied to him, isn't she? To us." A pause, thick as the fog of old lies. Elena's exhale crackled through the speaker. "Kid, you don't want this. She's poison, still sniffing around after all these years. Stay clear. Some secrets keep the peace." "Peace?" Sophia's voice sharpened, conflicted resolve pushing through. "Or just more hiding? Tell me her name." "Drop it, Sophia. For your own good. Your folks. They built walls for a reason." The line went dead, leaving Sophia staring at the blank screen, fear coiling cold in her veins, like icy fingers tracing the fractures she'd always sensed but never named. Elena's warning hung there, evasive and barbed, stoking the dread that her family's fragile truce might shatter under the weight. By the time she pushed through the front door of the family home, the scent of overcooked roast assaulted her. Margaret's doing, no doubt, her way of armoring the evening against intrusion. The dining room light bulb buzzed faintly, casting elongated shadows across the scarred oak table, where David sat nursing a tumbler of scotch, his shoulders hunched like a man bracing for fallout. Margaret bustled from the kitchen, plates clinking with forced efficiency, her fierce gaze flicking to Sophia with a vulnerability she rarely let show. "Dinner's ready," Margaret said, voice strained, setting down the serving dish as if it were a shield. "Sit. Eat. We've got enough problems without—" Sophia dropped her bag, the thud echoing her resolve. "Without what? The truth?" "I called Aunt Elena. She's dodging, but she knows. About Dad's fling. The one that's still here, in this town." David's glass paused midway to his lips, his resolute mask cracking into passive-aggressive frost. "Elena? Christ, Sophia, you stirring that pot now? After everything we've buried for healing?" Margaret's fork scraped the plate, her overbearing facade splintering as color drained from her face. "You what?" "Stay away from her. She's trouble. Always has been. I protected you from that mess." "Protected?" Sophia's laugh came out brittle, her fear of rejection surging like bile. She manipulated the air between them, leaning in to force the eruption. "Or hid your mistakes. Tell me, Mom. Dad. What did she have on him? On us?" David's eyes darted, avoidance twisting into quiet barbs. "This ain't healing. It's ripping open wounds we sealed shut." But his voice wavered, the pressure of unspoken history bearing down. Margaret slammed her napkin down, insecurities flaring fierce. "Enough! You think exposing it fixes anything? It'll destroy what's left." The words hung, betrayal's slow poison seeping into the oppressive silence, each heartbeat amplifying the fear that their bonds, frayed threads of pretense, might snap for good. Sophia's chest tightened, the room closing in with the weight of revelations half-born, dread rooting deep as the masks finally fractured. The cafe's haze clung to her skin like a second shadow as she shoved through the door into the thickening dusk, rain-slick streets reflecting the neon betrayal of her unraveling world. That razor-sharp memory twisted deeper, igniting a slow fury she couldn't douse, not with coffee, not with denial. Hours blurred in the rear view as she steered toward the old house, tires humming a dirge of unresolved graves. The porch loomed, its sagging boards whispering warning she ignored, her pulse a hammer against the silence of buried sins. The bitter tang of scorched toast lingered on David's tongue, a remnant from the breakfast he'd bolted down alone that morning, before the house had woken to swallow him whole. Elena slammed the kitchen door behind her, the hinges groaning like a confession dragged from the grave. She'd had enough of the half-shadows, the way her father sculpted through their days with that armored silence, as if the past were a locked safe he alone held the combination to. Margaret sat at the scarred oak table, her fingers twisting a dish rag into knots, eyes darting between them like a cornered animal. The fluorescent bulb overhead buzzed faintly, casting jagged pools of light on the linoleum, where crumbs from last night's uneaten meal lay scattered like accusations. "Dad," Elena said, her voice slicing through the hum, low and edged with the frustration that had been building since that cafe epiphany. The one that clawed at her even now, his aftershave ghosting through memories of shattered plates and slammed doors. "No more games. Who is she? The woman you've been hiding. The one that's poisoned everything since I was a kid. Tell me the truth, or I swear." David didn't look up from the newspaper folded in his lap, its ink-smudged pages a flimsy shield. His chair creaked as he shifted, the sound deliberate, dismissive. "Elena, drop it. You're stirring ghosts that don't need waking. We've got enough rot in this family without you digging deeper." The words landed like a slap, fueling the fire in her chest. She stepped closer, boots thudding against the floor, close enough to smell the stale coffee on his breath. "Rot? That's what you call it? The fights, the way Mom stares at walls like she's lost? I know there's someone. Letters, late nights, whispers. You've avoided this for years, but I'm done pretending. Face it, Dad. For once, heal us instead of burying us alive." Margaret's breath hitched, a sharp intake that cut the tension like a knife through fog. She rose slowly, her chair scraping back with a rasp that echoed Elena's resolve. "Enough," she murmured, but her voice cracked, fierce and frayed at the edges. Her hands trembled, Not from fear, but from the weight of secrets pressing down. Years of overprotecting what she'd shattered herself. David, she's right. I can't keep this in anymore. David's head snapped up, eyes narrowing, the passive wall he'd built cracking just a fraction. Margaret, stay out of it. This isn't— It is, she interrupted, stepping between them, her posture rigid yet crumbling, vulnerabilities spilling out in the quiver of her lip. The affair— It was me, Elena, not him. Years ago, when the loneliness ate me hollow, I strayed, thought it would fix what was breaking inside. But it poisoned us all. Your father knew, swallowed it to keep the family intact. I've been terrified you'd hate me, that the truth would unravel everything. Elena's world tilted, anger surging hot and blinding, not just at the revelation, but at the years of lies, the betrayal woven into their blood. She whirled on David, fists clenched. You knew, and you let me chase shadows, blaming you. All this time protecting her lies while I tore myself apart. He met her gaze, resolute beneath the pressure, but the fear flickered. Dark histories he'd dodged now flooding the light. I did it for you, for us. Healing? This isn't healing, it's destruction. Destruction? Elena's laugh was bitter, raw, echoing off the peeling wallpaper. The air thickened with the scent of old grease and unspoken rage, oppressive as a noose tightening. She backed toward the door, eyes blazing. If that's how you want it, fine. I'll expose it all. Tell everyone. Rip the veil off your perfect little facade. You won't bury this anymore. Margaret reached out, fierce desperation in her grasp. But Elena shrugged her off, storming into the dim hallway. The slam of the front door her final vow, leaving the kitchen to choke on the silence they'd sown. Hours dragged like smoke through the city's underbelly, Elena's fury curdling into a desperate ache that clawed at her ribs. She gunned the engine, tires biting asphalt as the suburbs bled into industrial decay, the air thick with the rot of forgotten promises. Betrayal hung heavy, a noose tightening with every mile toward her father's old haunt, where ghosts of hidden truths lurked in the rust and gloom. The hush where Elena's slammed door should have reverberated, leaving only the faint creak of floorboards under shifting feet. Sophia stood frozen in the kitchen's dim overhang, her pulse a dull throb against the absence of motion. Margaret hovered at the table's edge, fingers splayed on scarred wood, as if anchoring herself to its unyielding grain. The air carried no scent of Elena's usual chamomile tea, just the stale undercurrent of yesterday's coffee grounds festering in the sink. Desperation coiled in Sophia's chest, like rusted wire, tightening with each breath she denied herself. We can't let her go alone, Sophia said, voice low, scraping against the quiet. Her determination warred with the fear of fractures widening, family splintering under truths she'd chased for months. Margaret's eyes, shadowed hollows in the weak bulb light, flicked toward the window, then away. Vulnerable, yet her jaw held that fierce line, protecting what scraps of unity remained. Elena was already halfway down the cracked sidewalk when they caught her, Margaret's old sedan coughing to life in the driveway like a reluctant witness. The drive blurred into oppressive stretches of faded billboards and chain-link fences guarding empty lots, the engine's rumble underscoring the silence between them. No radio chatter, no small talk to fill the void. Sophia gripped the door handle, knuckles whitening, her mind replaying fragments of overheard arguments, the ghost of her father's absence since the accident, or whatever it truly was. The workplace loomed at the city's frayed edge, a squat warehouse with peeling paint and windows smeared black by years of neglect. Father's old haunt, where he'd vanished into shifts of grinding machinery and whispered deals. The chain across the entrance dangled loose, inviting trespass. Elena shoved through first, her reckless fire propelling her into the gloom, shoulders squared against the shadows that swallowed corners whole. Inside, the air thickened with dust motes suspended in slanted light, the metallic tang of idle presses biting at their throats. Footsteps echoed off concrete floors pitted like old wounds. They moved deeper, past rusted shelving units groaning under forgotten crates, until a figure emerged from the murk. A wiry man in oil-stained overalls, his face a map of creases, wiping hands on a rag that smelled of solvent and regret. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, eyes darting like cornered prey. But Elena pressed forward, passionate words tumbling out in a rush. Questions about David, the ledgers, the nights he came home hollow-eyed. The man hesitated, glancing at Margaret, recognition flickering. Sophia's heart hammered, desperation flooding her veins. She stepped closer, conflicted urge to pull back warring with the need to unearth the rot. He sighed, the sound heavy as settling debris. "David, he had sides you didn't see. Secret life, yeah. Not just the overtime lies." His voice dropped, reluctant syllables dragged out. "Hidden account, tucked away in that offshore hole. Tied to her, the woman from the East Side office. Payments for years, quiet as a grave." Margaret stiffened, a sharp intake of breath cutting the tension. The words hung, exposing fractures long sealed. Sophia turned, eyes locking on her mother's face, the fierce mask cracking. "Her?" Sophia whispered, the betrayal blooming cold in her gut. Elena whirled, reckless anger flaring. "Who, Mom? Tell us!" Margaret's shoulders slumped, the overbearing shield crumbling under the weight. "It was me," she confessed, voice fracturing like thin ice. "The affair. I thought it would hold us together, after his gambling debts piled up. The account was ours, hidden from you girls, from him even, at the end. I was protecting us." Tears carved tracks through the dust on her cheeks, but her eyes burned fierce, insecurities laid bare in the vulnerable admission. Sophia recoiled, the truth a blade twisting deep. Years of haunted silences explained, yet the family she'd fought for teetering on abandonment's edge. Elena's hand found hers, a reckless grip anchoring the storm, while the warehouse pressed in, its oppressive weight mirroring the desperation that bound them now. The silence clawed at Sophia's throat, betrayal's shadow thickening the air like cigarette smoke in a back-alley dive. Hours dragged through the night, her pulse a relentless drum against the kitchen's scarred walls, Margaret's hovering form dissolving into memory's haze. Resolve seeped in with the false light of dawn, cold and inexorable, drawing her to the study where secrets hid in digital veins. Her fingers itched toward the keyboard, the point of fracture looming. Outside, the distant rumble of a truck's engine growled through the cracked window pane, vibrating the glass like a threat. Inside, Sophia's breath rasped, shallow and insistent, drowning it out. She lingered in the kitchen's dim overhang, the fluorescent bulb above the sink flickering its cold judgment on the linoleum's scuffed tiles. Elena's confession still hung there, raw and jagged. A whispered admission of stolen nights with a man from the old neighborhood, the one whose shadow had twisted their home into something brittle. "It wasn't just once," Elena had said, her voice cracking like dry leather, eyes darting to the floor, as if the truth might slither back into hiding. David had sat across the table, his knuckles whitening around a coffee mug that hadn't steamed in minutes, the silence between them thickening like congealing blood. Sophia pressed her palm flat against the scarred oak table, the wood's rough grain biting into her skin. Her mother's words clawed at the edges of her resolve, but it was the unspoken undercurrent, the way Elena's gaze had flickered toward David, laced with something sharper than regret, that ignited the fire. Betrayal, layered and festering, not just from one side, but both. Sophia's chest tightened, her drive to unearth the rot surging past the fear of what it might shatter. She couldn't let it bury them again. David shifted in his chair, the legs scraping softly against the floor. A passive scrape, avoiding the storm. "We can talk this through," he murmured, voice low and measured, but his eyes avoided hers, sliding instead to the window, where the truck's rumble faded into the night. Pressured, yes, but resolute only in deflection. His shadow loomed in that evasion, the passive-aggressive tilt of his head, saying more than words ever could. He wanted healing, but on terms that kept the darkness at arm's length. Elena rose then, her movements reckless in their passion, chair tipping back with a thud. Talk? We've buried this for years, David. Sophia deserves the truth. All of it. Her voice trembled with advocacy, but Sophia saw the recklessness beneath, the fear of being silenced twisting her features into something fierce. Elena's hand reached out, hovering near Sophia's shoulder, but pulled back, afraid, perhaps, of rejection in this moment of exposure. Sophia pulled away, her conflicted determination hardening into something unyielding. The family's past wasn't a ghost anymore, it was a chain, and she held the key. Without a word, she slipped from the kitchen, her footsteps muffled on the threadbare carpet of the hallway. The house pressed in, walls stained with years of unvoiced accusations, the air thick with the faint, acrid tang of yesterday's cigarettes from David's ashtray. In the study, the computer hummed faintly, its screen a blank void in the gloom. Sophia's fingers flew over the keys, heart pounding a steady rhythm against her ribs. She bypassed the password, child's play, an old trick from sifting through her parents' silences, and delved into the emails. There, buried in innocuous threads about work and bills, the confirmations bloomed like poison flowers. Tender exchanges with Carla, the woman from the corner office downtown, dated just last month. Miss you already, one read. Our secret keeps me going, another. Ongoing, unrepentant. Her breath caught, but the initial shock ebbed into a cold clarity. No more manipulations. No more hiding behind half-truths to shield herself from abandonment. This was the point of no return. Their fractures laid bare, demanding confrontation. Sophia closed the laptop with a decisive snap, resolve settling like iron in her veins. Tomorrow, she'd face David, then Carla. The truth would heal, or it would break them clean. Either way, the haunting ended here. Hours dragged into a sleepless haze, the kitchen's chill seeping into her bones like regret. Sophia's fingers trembled as she clutched the crumpled note, its words a venomous whisper, echoing the truck's fading growl. Vulnerability clawed at her chest, raw and unrelenting, pushing her out into the rain-slick streets. The city's underbelly loomed, oppressive shadows twisting under sodium lamps, drawing her toward the dimly lit apartment where answers, or betrayal, awaited. The kitchen, dawn's first gray smear through the blinds. Sophia gripped the edge of the sink, knuckles whitening against the chipped porcelain, the metallic tang of old faucet drips sharp in her nostrils. Her pulse thudded like a trapped animal's, echoing the faint creak of floorboards behind her. She didn't turn. Not yet. The air in the room thickened with the scent of stale coffee grounds and yesterday's grease, clinging to the walls like unspoken accusations. "Margaret," Sophia said, voice low and edged, slicing the quiet. She straightened, forcing her shoulders back, though her stomach twisted with the weight of it all. The letters she'd found, the half-whispered names that unraveled everything. "We need to talk. Now." Footsteps paused. Then, Margaret emerged from the shadowed hallway, her bathrobe hanging loose over a frame that seemed smaller in the flickering light. Eyes red-rimmed but defiant. David trailed a step behind, his face a mask of forced calm, hands shoved deep into his pockets as if to keep them from betraying him. "Sophia, it's too early for this," Margaret murmured, but her tone carried that familiar steel, the one that had always bent conversations to her will. She moved to the table, pulling out a chair with a scrape that set Sophia's teeth on edge. "Sit. Whatever it is, we can—" "No." Sophia whirled, her voice cracking like thin ice. The fluorescent buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows that deepened the lines on Margaret's face. "The affair. The money you siphoned from Dad's accounts to cover it. I found the records. Don't lie to me anymore." David exhaled sharply, a sound like wind through dry leaves. He leaned against the doorframe, not quite entering the fray, his gaze flicking between them. "Soph, maybe we should—" "Shut up, David," Sophia snapped, her chest heaving. She stepped closer to Margaret, the linoleum cold under her bare feet, grounding her fury. "You think I won't walk away? That I'll just swallow this like you did? Tell me why. Why drag us all into your mess?" Margaret's lips parted, then pressed thin, her hands folded on the table, fingers interlacing with deliberate care. But Sophia caught the tremor, the crack in the armor. "It wasn't like that," she said finally, voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "Your father, he was gone long before. I protected us. From the shame, from him finding out and tearing everything apart." "Lies," Sophia hissed, leaning in, the heat of her breath mingling with the room's stale warmth. "You protected yourself, always have. And now? Now I know why we never talk about the past. Because it's all rot." David shifted, his voice cutting in soft but insistent, laced with that passive bite he wielded like a shield. "You're twisting it, Soph. Mom's right. We were all hurting. Blaming her won't fix." "Fix what?" Sophia rounded on him, betrayal burning hot in her throat. "Your silence? Pretending it didn't happen while she played the martyr? You're as bad as she is." The words hung, sharp and final. Margaret rose slowly, her chair tipping back with a thud that reverberated through Sophia's bones. "If that's what you think, then go. I've carried this family on my back for years. I won't beg." David's eyes met Sophia's for a beat, resolute, yet retreating, before he looked away, murmuring, "I need air," and slipped toward the back door, leaving the echo of his footsteps. Margaret followed without a word, her silhouette vanishing into the hall, the door clicking shut like a lock turning. Sophia stood alone, the kitchen's chill seeping into her skin, the drip of the faucet now a relentless countdown. Her hands fell limp at her sides, the fight draining out, leaving only the raw ache of exposure. No one reached back. The ties snapped, one by one, and in the oppressive quiet she was adrift, small, unseen, the weight of their absence pressing down like the walls closing in. Hours bled into shadowed days, the kitchen's dawn tension coiling tighter in Sophia's gut like rusted wire. She pressed on, sifting through faded ledgers and whispered lies, each discovery a bitter stain of betrayal etching deeper into her resolve. The family's oppressive silence thickened, hope a fragile spark amid the gloom, as the truth she'd unearthed clawed toward exposure, forcing the fatal crossroads where blood ties would shatter. 3 days of fractured whispers had eroded the fragile truce in the house, leaving Elena's resolve sharpened like a blade against bone. She stood in the dim parlor, the threadbare rug muffling her steps as she clutched the stack of yellowed letters, their edges frayed from too many secret readings. The air carried the stale bite of yesterday's coffee grounds, mingled with the faint, acrid scent of David's unlit pipe tobacco scattered across the side table. Margaret hovered by the mantel, her fingers twisting the hem of her faded apron, eyes darting between the door and her daughter, like a cornered fox weighing escape routes. David burst in from the hall, his face a map of fresh fury, the door slamming back against the wall with a thud that rattled the framed family portrait above. "What the hell is this?" he snarled, thrusting a crumpled printout toward Elena, the email chain she'd sent to that nosy journalist, pieced together from her careless laptop left open in the den. His voice cracked on the edges, not with rage alone, but the raw undercurrent of a man staring down his own ghosts. "You've been digging, girl, snooping into things that should have stayed buried, for your own good, for all of ours." Elena's pulse hammered in her throat, but she held her ground, the letters crumpling in her grip. "It's not buried, Dad. It's rotting us from the inside. The accident, the payoffs, Mom's signature on those falsified reports. I have to tell it all." Her words spilled out reckless, fueled by the fire of truth she'd chased for months, each revelation a spark against the shadows of their shared silence. She saw Margaret flinch, the woman's fierce mask cracking to reveal the vulnerability beneath, her overbearing grip on the family now a desperate anchor slipping free.